All right, appreciate you spending some time here. I want you to listen to these numbers. These numbers are incredible. A survey from the Pew Research Center reflects the distaste the nation has with politics. 4 times as many Americans have an unfavorable view of both parties than they did in 2002. An all-time high. Republicans and Democrats equally unpopular in the survey. Trust in the government is at a 70-year low. 16% of the public say they trust the federal government at least most of the time. And 2/3 of Americans say they feel exhausted when they think about politics. I have a higher rating with my ex-wife. This is incredible. 37%, and here, what a disparity this is. And for the political parties, for my party, the Republican Party, because I'm selfish, I want them to be smart. But for both parties, I want you to listen to this. 37% of 18 to 29-year-olds, there's your future. These are your future voters if you do things right. 37% of them view both parties unfavorably, compared to just 16% of 65 and older. So older people are locked in with their party alliance. They don't like the other party, but they're satisfied. They have a favorable view of their party. Now, we understand you're caught between a rock and a hard place because both in the Republican and Democratic Party, the majority of your voters are older. People tend to get older and more invested in society and paying more attention to property taxes and local and state taxes in schools and their kids. Then they start getting more inclined to be involved in the political process. We know that to be true, but you're looking at your future here. 37% of 18 to 29-year-olds don't like either party. You wonder why we have such a huge number of people registering as independents. Do you think an independent voter is not someone that is politically inclined or have strong political opinions one way or the other? I would say you're wrong. They are very opinionated. What they are not is allied with a party. They don't believe you speak for them anymore. Period. So they speak for themselves. 68% of Americans overall say they at least somewhat wish there were more parties to choose from, but they're not convinced that having more than 2 major parties would make it easier to solve the nation's problems. Again, this is the issue that at my age, I like the 2-party system. I like the checks and balances between Republicans and Democrats. I heard Jordan B. Peterson, this isn't my statement, this is Jordan B. Peterson, made a very eloquent statement, and he said, this country needs liberals. We need liberals because sometimes we have to find a new way of doing something. And the world needs conservatives because sometimes doing things the way you've done them in the past is still the right way to do things. And they should argue about which is the best way to solve the current problem we're discussing. That, in a perfect world, is the way it's supposed to be. Here's the big picture. 87% of Republicans and 85% of Democrats agreed with the idea that politicians in both parties are more focused on fighting each other than solving problems. Let me say that again. 87% of Republicans and 85% of Democrats believe that politicians from both parties are more interested in fighting with each other than solving problems. Is anybody listening? Is anybody listening? I think that's a huge issue. That is a red flag. Americans want limits on those in government. 87% want term limits. 79% support age limits. 87% of people polled, these are voters, say that we should have term limits. The problem with term limits in my mind, and I would be in the minority on this, and the reason why I still say I don't like term limits is because we have them at the ballot box every 2 years. But the reason why I don't like term limits is what happens when you get someone that's exceptional at their job. You're going to lose them at the end of their term limitation. Democrats were about twice as likely as Republicans to say the federal government does more for ordinary Americans than people give it credit for. That is that's a partisan, that's the way you feel about government. I don't trust it. Democrats do. They see them more, and this isn't, again, it's not an insult. It's an observation. Democrats believe the government is there to solve problems, and I don't. I believe problems are better solved individually and in the private sector. When asked to use their own words to describe the biggest problem with the political system, Americans' most common answer, 31% of the time. So this is interesting. Hey, Julia, you haven't seen this, so let me ask you a question. When asked, Americans were asked, what is the biggest problem with the political system? The most popular answer was 31% of the times. What do you think that word was? What do you think it was? The problems in America.
That it's too partisan?
Nope. Well, yeah, close. Politicians.
Okay.
Yeah, some version of politicians are the problem, not the solution. That's pretty interesting, don't you think?
I think it makes total sense.
Yeah, and it does. 31% of the time, a version of the word politicians. I thought this was fascinating because we have another GOP debate coming up. There is a dead heat in the head-to-head matchup between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It is a dead heat. And who would win that race? The majority of Americans still say they don't want either one. The statistic in this for everybody to listen to, 87% of Republicans and 85% of Democrats have said in this survey, both parties are more focused on fighting than they are solving problems. It's an amazing number,